The Everything Sequel podcast is brought to you by 2T Fitness and the Vegas Beer Guys.
The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. You have been forewarned. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is the Star Trek edition. Today we're talking Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Underrated. Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, of course, the man we need not search for, because he's always right here for us. Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello, Tom.
Aye, and if my grandmother had wheels, she'd be a wagon. I have so much to say about that line. First of all, it is this film is the beginning of a
It's not the beginning; it's the middle. It's the middle of a trilogy.
No, listen. It's the beginning of a remarkable story arc for Scotty.
You're right.
Prior to this, he has been, chief engineer par excellence. In this film, he transforms into king of the Luddite saboteurs.
I was going to say, the saboteur du jour.
Who's suddenly anti-scientific progress. He hooks up with Uhura in a couple of films' time.
Yeah.
And then in the Next Generation, he's at sea once again in the episode Relics, where he turns up. He turns up in the future and he's now outmoded in his thinking again. So from this point onwards, that and the time travel in Star Trek 4, Scotty is never quite with the times from this point onwards.
Yeah, Star Trek 4, he's all about messing up the space-time continuum. He could give a fuck.
But also, each of these movies has a device for examining the aging of the cast. And this one, it's all about the Excelsior.
Right.
That is. But
aside from that, it's kind of set aside in this
mortality.
movie.
Yeah.
It's different than, say, Star Trek 2 or Star Trek 6.
Yeah, it's not a theme in the same way.
Yeah.
In this movie, it's all tied to the threat of the Excelsior kind of wiping them out. Mm-hmm. Wiping out their relevance.
Oh, you got a fancy new warp drive, huh?
Yeah.
Whatever.
And it's fascinating in that respect.
Yeah.
Also, the fact that they arrive back at Space Dock and they're told there will be no refit.
Right.
And the first thing we see in Star Trek: The Motion Picture is the Enterprise being refitted.
Exactly.
So we've done a full 360 on that.
We're done.
Mm.
Yeah, in fact, it's funny because...
Unless some unfortunate accident should befall the Enterprise.
Right. Because, we're already skipping ahead, but that scene where Scotty says, "No, thanks, I want nothing to do with the Excelsior, please. I'll refit the Enterprise."
It's a total departure for the character, as far as I can tell. Scotty has always been the beacon of science and technology, and here he's sort of saying, there are limits to this, which is interesting because
I'll stick with what I've got.
Right, and it's interesting because I think he represents the philosophy of this movie towards science and scientific advancement more generally, which is fairly negative, I'd say. Of all these films,
well,
this is
because
the one
you
that
also
has
have
the least is the most negative about science being able to move us forward as a culture.
Yeah, but one of the things that I do like about it is that this movie kind of posits through David, not that the science was messed up, but that the individual was messed up, that he reached too far, that he wanted to go further, faster. So he made some shortcuts with Genesis, but
unfortunately he represents science.
Yeah, right.
and the movie, well, we'll talk about it later, but
yeah,
I'll say it now just to sort of set up my stall. Upon watching this film for the I don't know how how manyth time. I realized, upon analysis, this is a Reaganite, pro-faith, anti-science film. And I hate learning that more than I possibly ever hated realizing anything in my life. But it really is.
Well, we'll talk about it as we go along.
Yeah.
Because we talked about this. All right, well, wait, let's reset. Ladies and gentlemen, as if you didn't know, we are talking about...
like Captain Kirk's emotional crisis.
Yes.
Let's reset.
We're talking about Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, a 1984 film directed by Leonard Nimoy. Leonard Nimoy joins the pantheon of Star Trek directors by directing this and the next movie. And it's funny with him as a director because, like Nicholas Meyer, I think of Leonard Nimoy as a completely competent, good director, but not, it's like this, Star Trek IV, The Good Mother, Three Men and a Baby, and Funny About Her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's pretty much it, at least feature films.
Right.
So again, we're dealing with a director that has like a proven track record, at least within this franchise, like Nicholas Meyer, but somebody who, in Three Men and a Baby, that was a breakaway hit.
It really was, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, again, I think it's just quality over quantity.
Mm-hmm.
But, the way he handles himself as a director in this movie, I think is magnificent.
Me too.
Because he
makes this movie interesting to look at.
Well, I would say
in several scenes.
He ticks all the boxes as what I think of as what I want from a director.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd also say as an actor director,
yeah,
he had his own kind of Kobayashi Maru here, in that he's directing a film in which his character's name is in the title,
but that he's not in much.
No, but that's it. His no-win scenario, his Kobayashi Maru is, how do I not turn this into a vanity project?
Right.
And he turns that into a win-win scenario.
Yeah.
Because, he chooses to remove himself from the movie until it's absolutely necessary.
Right.
And focus on everybody else in the cast.
And like you said in our ranking episode, like he does a lot for William Shatner in this movie.
Yeah, and DeForest Kelley as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, when the opportunity arises to put Spock on screen, he milks it for all it's worth.
Sure.
So he not only does he understand the role of director, he understands how to be an actor director, which I think
and also not just that, but he understands his character in the universe and specifically within this film.
Yeah.
So he knows where to put him and how to use that character and what he needs from the character.
Yeah. And instead of recording an introduction to The Final Frontier, can we just reverse everything we've said about William Shatner? We don't. Let's just. Can you just play it backwards, or like change every other noun, and you'll have exactly the same answer.
Right.
I think a remark. I mean, it never fails to amaze me, both in this and the next film, how assured Nimoy's grip on this material is.
It really is, and it really shows. And I watched this movie for a second time in the last few days,
mm-hmm.
And I mean, I could see it on the first viewing, but it really struck me on the second viewing.
Yeah.
Like his imprint on the movie as a director. And it's funny because, again, also in our ranking episode, we kind of talked about how 1, 3, and 5 in the series are thought of as kind of the bastard children.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't add up for this movie. It's got 79% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is only, I think, 3% less than Wrath of Khan. On
Interesting.
a budget of 17 million, an opening weekend of 16.6, and in the USA and the world 76.4.
Hmm.
People went and saw this movie. This movie was a legitimate hit.
Yeah, and yet by the end of this movie, even the director himself realized it was time to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That you needed to take the series in a different
In a different direction.
So,
But again, that's smart on his part.
that's very smart on his part, but it also speaks to some of the more questionable choices in terms of story and tone,
Yeah.
I think, with this film. That needed redressing by not to say that they shouldn't have happened, we shouldn't have tried, but after we've done it, we need to do something different.
Right.
And
Well, and I think that was maybe one of the reasons I always, again, we had talked before about sort of the popular cultural ideas of some of these movies and how they kind of infect your brain, and
yeah,
the fact that they're thought of as bad movies, and when you watch them you think, but this isn't bad.
no,
But I think maybe wrapped up within, specifically for Star Trek III: The Search for Spock, is where we really are dealing with all the aftermath of Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. So we're still dealing with Genesis. We're dealing with the death of Spock and trying to find him again. And so maybe wrapped up in that people wanted a whole new, fresh story. And we're really,
yeah,
we've talked about this before. This is the middle part of a trilogy, a mini trilogy within the
Right.
sequels themselves. And so if you remove that bias against the movie and just look at it on its face, this is a good fucking movie.
Yeah, absolutely. No question about it. And it worked. I mean, it's solid.
Yeah.
It's solidly executed. It's plays it safe, middle of the road, in a way that is very satisfying, and I don't want to take away from that. I think
we talked in the ranking.
The series had continued to make movies like this, I don't think I don't think it would be a huge problem. But when you see what they're capable of in terms of originality, for the next few movies, you do realize that they could have worked a little bit harder on moving beyond the original blueprint of Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that maybe it seemed like a really good decision at the time because of the success of Wrath of Khan.
Well, and also,
this is what people want from Star Trek. Why on earth should we not give it to them?
Well, not just that, but I mean, think in terms of, I mean, we've been doing this a while now. Can you think of another series that specifically kind of continues the story in in the way that this series does? I mean, all movies are connected to the previous movie or the original,
right.
But this is real specific.
I'll go you one better. Star Trek didn't do this again for another 10 years after the end of I guess Deep Space Nine, which is 93 to 96, was the next time they attempted a serialized format.
Right.
So this is unusual even for Star Trek.
Yeah.
And of course, the original series doesn't have any serial connection between any of the episodes. They're all it's an episodic series. So it's remarkable in terms of film sequels. It's remarkable in terms of the franchise. It's one of the most interesting pieces of storytelling in all of sequel cinema.
Yeah, I think so too.
And
because all three movies are very different from each other.
Right.
But we are continuing with a single story among, from the three.
And I think you can differentiate, at least I think I can differentiate the idea of doing of continuing the story in a serial fashion from leaning too heavily on what we've already done.
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually think I don't have any. I think it was a really good decision to continue the story in the manner they did. I just think they needed to find something that wasn't going as head to head with Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
As it did. You know, there's certain points in the movie you would think, well, this is very reminiscent of the same sequence in Wrath of Khan at this exact point of the movie. You know, they're trying to double down on everything they do in Wrath of Khan, and even in a serialized format, you don't need to do that.
It always felt to me like maybe in their minds they thought, well, we're back with the Klingons, and that's enough.
Right.
You know, so like you said, we're seeing sort of similar waypoints throughout the movie, same as Wrath of Khan, but they think because we're battling the Klingons that maybe that's enough to differentiate.
And the Klingons feel tacked on.
Yeah.
In this film.
Exactly.
And yet, historically...
Christopher Lloyd.
Well, historically, I mean, it is, you know, we've... So far in the film series, since the cinematic reinvention of the Klingons in design terms,
mm-hmm.
we've seen minutes of them so far. We've seen a few minutes in the beginning of the motion picture.
Mm-hmm.
So the entire modern day idea of the Klingons in the Star Trek franchise begins here.
Begins with
Christopher
this movie.
Lloyd.
Yeah.
So in terms of the story, you always feel like the Klingons are you know, tacked on. You know, they're just a recognizable villain that we can sort of pin the film on. And yet, there's so much. There's talk of all the things that will be expanded upon in the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine.
Sure.
Honor, you know, death with honor, the look,
mm-hmm.
The military structure of the Klingon bird of prey, cloaking,
right.
Cloaking. I mean, the cloaking lore begins here and it never fucking ends. And so, you know, it's really interesting. Like, it's narratively the weakest, and yet mythologically, it
looms large, right?
In the whole franchise, because without it, I don't think you have Worf.
Yeah.
Or you know, or Alexander, and maybe one of those two is a good thing, but I want at least one of those Klingons in the world. Guess which one?
Well, now, let me ask you this. So, when we're dealing with watching the end of the last movie, do we count that as a cold open? For our impasse?
Well, you've taken the words quite literally out of my mouth. Because one of my first notes is that the titles quite literally fall over the final scene of the last film.
Yeah. Well, and then we go to the sky. But...
Well, the only other time I remember this is in Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Where the titles begin to fall. I think that is still original footage, though.
In this movie?
No, in
Beneath
Apes. The Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
I mean, it picks up at the exact moment that Charlton Heston sees the Statue of Liberty.
Right.
But I think everything from that point onwards is original footage. And
but you also notice in this movie that Leonard Nimoy, as the director, he still makes choices. The little blue box.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so...
well, yeah.
He's going for like an artsy-fartsy revisit of what just happened as the box kind of expands and gets bigger.
I don't know if it's artsy-fartsy. I mean, obviously, you know, we're recapping the ending of the last film. That's an impasse.
Tried and true.
I think it's, you know, I mentioned it in Wrath of Khan, and you'll get it in any film that's about television. We start with this tiny black and white rectangle on a big screen.
Yeah.
Which gradually expands to cinematic screen ratio, and color is gradually added.
Sure.
So what he's doing is, I guess it is artsy-fartsy, but he's narrating the jump from TV to silver screen.
Yeah, right. But it's odd because the thing that's representing the TV was silver screen itself.
Yeah.
Like, I get that the episode was originally television, like dealing with Khan, but...
Yes. But it's again, I think it is just, you know, from film aesthetics to television aesthetics.
Yeah.
Is the kind of is the distinction being made here. And then we get a big chunk of the end of the last movie, including Leonard Nimoy's outro, which is now our intro.
Yeah.
Rocky style.
Yeah. Right.
It's that big a trunk. It's a Rocky sized chunk. And so, right from the beginning, you're aware that this is the second part of a serial. Like the film makes no attempt to hide that at all. Like from
the movie's announcing this is what we're doing. We're on our way home.
We're in those clouds for a while.
We are,
which
yes.
we knew we were gonna be as soon as we saw those clouds. We're gonna be here for a while.
My note is long cloud credits.
There's the guarantee of all these movies. However they choose to display the titles, you will be there for a while.
Right.
And you're. It's interesting. We get it. We see that Savik's been recast, even in the titles.
Hey, what do you think of her?
Robin Curtis?
Yeah.
She is good. I've seen her better than she is here.
See, I thought so too.
She's actually very good. She plays a Romulan in an episode of Next Generation. She's actually she's better suited to that than she is necessarily a Savik.
And I guess because I think I mentioned this in Wrath of Khan, because the character has way more to do in this movie than obviously Star Trek 4, where they didn't know what to do with her, so they just left her on Vulcan. But
no, that's partially true, but the real reason they did know what to do with her, but they cut it out.
Well, I guess my understanding was they felt like kind of her story was done.
No, they wanted to. So the original idea. Did you want to talk about this now? Because it's more relevant to. Well, actually, the moment happens in this film. So they originally wrote a storyline in which Savick has sex with Spock during his Pon farr while he's regrowing. While he, during his repuberty.
Yeah.
And so she has Spock's baby.
She rubs a little cradle. Oh, that I do remember reading that she was pregnant.
So that was where her story was supposed to go in Star Trek 4. So, but they decided they didn't want to go in that direction eventually. So there were plans for Savick, but but
at any rate, I remember, I think I was talking in the last episode about we both were talking about Kirstie Alley, and I would have liked to have seen her, like what she would have done, like with this role, and continued as Savick. But
definitely, there's been a shift. She's much more of a kind of generic Vulcan type in this. And I don't know how much of that is the performance and how much is the writing. I imagine both.
That's the thing, because I kept thinking about Star Trek 2, and I kept thinking about, like, Kirstie Alley felt very Vulcan to me, but I also liked this idea of her questioning the captain about the Kobayashi Maru and what's fair, and like, and that to me shows emotion, and that to me was interesting. So that kind of idea wrapped up in what she's doing here would have been interesting. But again, like, is it written in there, or what was Kirstie Alley bringing that much to it, or so?
Well, the more interesting kind of play and kind of pseudo recasting of this is in Star Trek 6.
Yeah.
With Valeris.
With Kim Cattrall.
And that speaks more to doing something interesting with the Savick role than was done with her when Robin Curtis took over for these two films, I think.
All right.
Which is not to, perfectly solid performance. We're going to get Judith Anderson at some point as well.
Yeah.
Which is a very big name. And the movie's kind of putting it out there at the beginning. So recasting and celebrity cameos, and we are familiar with these concepts when it comes to sequels.
Are we not? Yes.
It's really interesting that the film starts with the captain's personal log. This may be the first time we've done this.
Right.
Rather than the official log. and it suggests to me that that we're more interested in the emotional arcs of our characters than necessarily their plot function.
There, right.
At this point, maybe that's too much of an assumption, but I think that's where we're going. I mean, it's also great. It's a great exposition dump, right? It's we know everything we need to know from this log. Enterprise is returning from Genesis. We're picking up where we left off. Everything that's happened in between is covered in this log. So, but it's also Kirk's self-reflection.
Yeah.
And he's kind of verbalizing not just how he's feeling, but also where Spock stands in relation to him as a character. He calls him the noblest part of myself.
Yeah.
Which is something we've always kind of known. I don't know whether we've ever pinned it down this definitively before.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we always... Spock is the logical side of Kirk.
Well, and you get a real... I mean, you kind of... Once Sarek shows up, you kind of get an even... I like that you get a kind of deeper understanding of Spock and Kirk and exactly how deep that friendship is. Because Sarek can't believe that it would be anybody other than Kirk who got the mind dump.
Well, it's also a really, it's like a very sort of gripping way to do exposition, right?
Yeah.
Because he comes in and he shouts at Kirk and he's saying, "How could you do this? How could you leave him there?" And once again, we're restacking everything.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like restacking because it's in the middle of a heated, dramatic scene that's played well between two actors. And I think
he's so good in that scene.
Mark Leonard.
Yeah, Mark Leonard.
Well, I mean, he's an actor without whom Star Trek would not exist.
Mm-hmm.
He's played a Klingon, a Vulcan, and a Romulan.
Wow.
He was in Balance of Terror, which is frequently cited as one of the best episodes of Star Trek of all time. He's in the motion picture, and he plays Sarek in the original series, in these films, and also in The Next Generation.
Yeah.
So he is the Star Trek repertory company, basically.
Right. I love that scene between him and Kirk, though. We
haven't. The other great thing about it, the other amazing thing about it, for a fan, you haven't seen Sarek since Journey to Babel. He's only in one episode of the original series. So for him to turn up like that, in retrospect, you're used to him popping up in various Star Trek shows and films, but when it happens here, it's a huge deal. This callback to this again. It speaks to how these are double sequels.
Yeah, right.
We're really not. We're really in 1984. We're really not expecting to see Sarek ever again.
Mm-hmm.
The other, basically, what I'm trying to say, what I'm kind of groping at saying is this movie does exposition extremely well.
Extremely well. You're right. Yeah.
It doesn't ever feel like a overdone or clunky. It's always delivered dramatically, and I'm the screenplay deserves credit, but also Nimoy deserves credit.
Yeah.
Because he did a great job of shielding quite how much exposition is in that first third of the movie.
Right.
Even when that check-in with the crew that we get, we're just like we're seeing who came back basically, and we're checking in on the ship. It's like we're looking at emotional damage and physical damage.
Yes, right.
It's just handled in a really interesting way. Although I think it's amazing. This is the third film in a row where Kirk begins in the middle of an emotional crisis. Like his character development is also his biggest reset as a character.
Yeah, right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Even at the beginning of the motion picture, he's sort of making a play to get the Enterprise back.
Yeah, right.
Not that the movie knows how to represent that in words, but we know, right? In acting,
we got to look at space for a good 20 minutes.
In 2.5 hours, we figure out that was what was going on.
That's funny.
Also in this, one of many examples I have, but of Nimoy directing Shatner well, and the two of them working together to create something really beautiful. Just they both understand how to play grief.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that one of the. I mean, this movie is full of amazing
Moments.
Kirk character and
Yeah.
Shatner acting moments. But the first one, I think, is when he collapses in the turbo lift after he's put a brave face on for the crew.
Right.
I mean, it's a beautiful piece of acting, but Shatner and Nimoy both understand it's like grief isn't permanent; it comes in waves.
Yes.
And you have to perform.
It can literally knock you on your ass, and that's what happens.
And also, and I don't know if I mean, maybe I'm underestimating what happened in Wrath of Khan, but what I really got from Nimoy directing Shatner here is you can see where Kirk is playing a role, and you can see where the true Kirk is coming out. Like they both seem, in this movie in particular, attuned to that. You know exactly when he's being deceptive. Not in a way, not that it spoils anything. It's that it's beautiful. It's just you can tell the difference between the performative Shatner and the Shatner
character,
playing the character of Kirk. And it's just a great use of an actor like Shatner, and that range he has to do both.
That's fantastic.
It really struck me just breaking it down. So many individual moments like that throughout it, but this is the first one I really noticed. I thought it's just.
Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing the underappreciated Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, a 1984 film directed by Leonard Nimoy. Well, like you said on our way out to commercial, Tom, we now let's get the Klingons involved.
Right.
And they are up to Klingon kind of shenanigans, aren't they?
Yeah. Did you? I mean, the first of all, when you see the model of the Klingon bird of prey, I thought there was a real improvement in.
Yeah, it looks good.
And effects.
Yeah.
And that's ILM, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's discernible from the last film. And not to mention, I mean, we've already spoken to it, but cloaking. This is the beginning. Star Trek will.
So I'm starting to sense that you're not a fan.
No, I have no objection to it. It's
okay.
Just, like as as I said in the ranking episode, I've been trying to watch the entirety of the classic Star Trek TV series, and there's a lot of talk about cloaking. Interestingly enough, there's also a lot of talk about Targs.
Oh, really?
Which is the animatronic pet that I believe we only see here, and yet you hear it referred back to numerous times.
What do you think of that puppet?
Great.
It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun, and I think it's part of where we elevate Star Trek to the cinematic, with an emphasis on creature design. Later on in the film, you've got the microbe shrimp,
Yeah, right.
Which is and which keeps growing as the film goes on. So
Yeah.
essentially, you're working on 3 different scales of model creatures, and it's kind of quite impressive, I think.
But the puppet, I mean, it looks like it could be straight out of something from The Dark Crystal. Looks super
Exactly.
cool.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, that they appear. Christopher Lloyd, you'll be remembered with honor.
Mm-hmm.
It's all in the wheelhouse, but this is the first time you're hearing any of it, really.
Right. So you're hearing it for the first time, and this is also the first time you're hearing the want is Genesis. And so maybe that's something that this movie suffers from in the
Yeah.
sense of 2 villains in a row want the same thing, and they're different,
Yes.
different species, different, whatever.
Yeah.
But they want the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I agree. I think that is they could have had as you say, a different want for Krug.
Yeah.
Um.
But I love the choice of Christopher Lloyd, because at this time, you loved Christopher Lloyd. We're not to Back to the Future yet.
No, we're
So-
Taxi.
So yeah,
Post
if you
Taxi.
loved Christopher Lloyd, you loved him because of Taxi.
Yeah.
And to see him de-Jimify himself
Mm-hmm.
is a real treat to me. And he's got so many just choice, great moments.
Yeah.
And again, we talked about Nimoy helping out Shatner. He does the same here. These moments of extreme close-up when he's
Yeah.
almost whispering into his subordinates' ears. And
Yeah, and
to me, it elevates we're talking about this idea of the same want as the last film, and maybe that lessens it a little bit. But Lloyd is a great enough actor that you understand it. I think, at least.
Yeah. I think he's playing the character really well and building, the Klingon type
Mm-hmm.
in a really interesting new way, and that's all kind of happening. The problem, as you've identified, is that
Well, what I
We're
like
cul-
is he's also not just a brute. It's not just
no,
a bat.
I mean,
Like he plays the character so smart.
I don't know whether this is
He's
a
outwitting Kirk in
I don't know
moments
whether
in this
this is
movie.
a problem or a nuance, but the Klingons come off slightly better than Kirk in the denouement of this movie.
Right.
I suspect, given what Nimoy's doing as a director and what this screenplay is capable of, it might not be an accident, but it is strange. They seem to have an honor system that Kirk cannot comprehend. He can't. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a mistake or, but some that there's definitely more to these Klingons.
Yeah.
Over the course of the movie, than you might expect, given that they were the sort of stock villains of the series for so long, and every time they needed a villain hole to plug, they put a Klingon in there.
Right. Right.
So, well, after that we go back to space dock, and of course that means everything slows down a little bit, but we don't indulge it like in the motion picture.
Can I ask you a question though?
Yeah.
What do you get? Because one of my notes is no time has passed, but a lot of time has passed. In the sense of, in this movie, it seems like it took them a long time to get home, but then they get back to Genesis very quickly.
Right, yeah.
And yet it doesn't seem like they've been gone long enough for Excelsior to get built, but that is what happened.
Yeah.
So there seems to be it seems as though the movie's trying to have the 2 years between the actual films, 82 and 84.
Yeah.
And also the time within the constraints of the narrative itself simultaneously at the same time.
Agreed. I think that's definitely true. And in that way it reminds me of again, Beneath the Planet of the Apes and Escape from the Planet of the Apes. You have to believe that Zero and Cornelius, said goodbye to
Right. Right.
said goodbye to Brent and went off and built a time machine.
Yeah. Just in case.
It's similar here. But I think, like everything in this movie, it's smoothed over to the point where you don't really mind.
Right. Yeah, I'll agree with that.
You can accept it.
But we got, not just the audience, but Kirk is finally learning that, it's McCoy.
Yeah.
That got mind melded with Spock. We talked in the last episode, of course, we're going to see the last movie on screen.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to enhance and rewind and fast forward on it and do all that good fun stuff.
Yeah. It's like no amount of Blade Runner is gonna is gonna disguise the fact that this is imbas upon imbas.
Right.
A recap of video footage from the previous film that was already video footage in the previous film.
Yeah.
And we've already seen at the beginning of the film.
Right.
Yeah, and this is another great moment where actor and director come together to make something truly special. The scene in Spock's quarters with DeForest Kelley.
Really good.
I mean, he appears out of the shadows. In DeForest Kelley in full bug-eyed force.
Yeah.
So between the lighting and the performance, it's a truly startling moment.
But not just for the audience, for Kirk as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he, again, this is our first payoff of this is actually the first payoff of the mind meld foreshadowing at the end of the previous movie.
Right.
So.
Well, because the first thing we hear, actually, upon Kirk entering Spock's quarters is Spock's voice.
Right. Oh, yeah, no, that at this point, we don't know how Spock's going to come back to life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we don't know by, the previous, like you said at the end of Wrath of Khan, they give you lots of different options about how Spock could survive death. And because we've not decided, we can play around a little bit and we can do these fake outs where it's like, well, maybe he'll just turn up in his quarters again.
Right.
Maybe he was there all along.
It
was Spock to the power of 2.
He might force ghost this shit.
Yeah. So I mean that's just a tremendous scene, and then we get all the sort of there will be no refit.
Yeah.
The Enterprise is 20 years old. Genesis is now a galactic controversy. So
I like that scene though with his commander when Kirk's trying to convince him to let him go back.
Yeah, we're not quite in retcon territory, but we're changing our perspective on everything we know.
Yeah, exactly.
So Genesis is no longer the future of mankind; it's the end of mankind.
Right.
Which and sequels have the right to do. Right, we've seen this before.
Sure. Right.
Change your perspective on a key plot issue, and this is what I actually think it's done pretty well.
I was going to say, I think it's actually pretty interesting.
But the 20-year-olds comment is again that's like the idea of this shit hot new ship and crew.
Yeah.
Taking the place of the Enterprise is how we deal with this idea of our characters fading from maturity into seniority. And then we have another, like, we're developing these parallel storylines. We go to the USS Grissom. It's like another new captain and another new crew. Every new film introduces us to a new ship.
Just to be blown up minutes later.
We're back with David and Savick. And they do, again, I think they do a really good job reestablishing the backstory, their character dynamics, which is especially important because you have a brand new actor in there.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, how is this relationship going to work now that it's a new actor?
But the one thing, it's interesting because the one thing that allows is for them to develop sort of on their own. Mm-hmm. I mean, I never have the sense that I have to remember the Savick from Wrath of Khan
Yeah. Well, I
And
think
I
they
think a
use
lot
the
of that just has to
opportunity.
do with the fact that we have a new actor. But
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's just gives you an opportunity to sort of start again,
yeah,
as if it's a brand new character.
yeah, right.
Uh, so they're playing both sides of that. Um, uh, yeah, so we have a lot of cross cutting, and when we go
Yeah, I
back
mean, we're
to
gonna get DeForest Kelly in the bar, and we're gonna
yeah,
get
we get to see the catwalk of casual wear that the crew will be wearing for the next two movies when they have a
yes.
little reception in Kirk's apartment. This is interesting. The fact that Kirk's apartment is the same as in the last movie, and
I noted that as well. Yeah,
that tells us we're not going to do another design overhaul of the franchise like we did in Wrath of Khan.
right.
This is the same universe. This is the same timeline.
And I think I spoke to that in our ranking episode about that kind of continuity between these three movies.
Yeah.
Really, it really stood out to me on the viewing for the podcast.
Oh yeah, it's huge. We get a mind meld, which is fascinating both because it's already a classic Star Trek staple.
Sure.
But this is not the first Starfleet captain that Sarek will mind meld with. He later does it to Picard.
Right.
So it's.
But again, like I think that Leonard Nimoy really brings something to that scene.
Yeah, and you almost forget that you're just quoting dialogue from the last
the last movie, exactly.
because
Because
that's exactly
he makes
what
it so interesting to watch as a director.
right. I mean, he's finding interesting ways to sort of recap footage.
Yeah.
And and for us to sort of keep raking over the same ground. I'd rather we weren't. I mean, it's just we keep going back to Wrath of Khan for our content.
Yeah.
And I think that's we keep having to go back to the well, and I think that's the problem, not that the movie's not the screenplay.
But how do you solve a problem like that when the characters actually need it? Not that it's not even just the audience needs it. It's that Sarek needs it. He needs to know what Spock did. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is kind of a retcon, really, isn't it? Like nobody knew that Spock's brain was in, that
Right.
that Vulcans could survive death before this. I mean, it's never come up, so we're inventing a new story problem.
Yeah, right. Because we want to keep Leonard Nimoy.
Because we want to keep, yeah, exactly. The other, I mean, there's that great scene between Kirk and the Admiral where he says, "I never understood this Vulcan mysticism."
Yeah.
And it goes back to this essential contradiction of the Vulcans. They're both faith and science at the same time, and it's really hard to like their tradition is one of mysticism, but their present day is all about empiricism, and this is something that the series has never resolved. And it's interesting that they make it into they put it in the words of this admiral.
Of a character,
Sounds like
right?
Exactly what Roddenberry used to say. So I think, and given that they stop him, the admiral is the first guy who's stopping them having any fun. I think he's meant to be a Roddenberry ringer.
That's funny.
In this, but it's also the first hint we're getting of the oppressive nature of Starfleet and the Federation,
right?
Which becomes a theme in the next few movies. It's the sense that it is not this utopian organization.
But you got to have some of that, right? So that Kirk can be the rule breaker that he is.
But this is the first time. I know, no, it's essential. But this is the first time we've kind of played that.
Yeah.
I think when it happens in the original series, it's very much Bad Admiral or Badmiral, as I like to call them. Is to blame, like an irresponsible admiral make them do something.
Mm-hmm.
But here, the admirals are all being leaned on by the council. It's sort of like it's the hierarchy that is of Starfleet that is making it difficult for people to take individual action.
Interesting.
The other great thing about this scene, this is probably my favorite acting moment and directing moment of the film, where just at the point at which Kirk decides he's gonna steal the Enterprise and pretend to the Admiral that he's not gonna go to Genesis, Nimoy zooms in just for a second on face, just as he's making the decision, and he catches the moment that Shatner playing Kirk expresses that he's decided.
Is bullshitting.
Yeah, he makes his decision, and then and the rest of the scene is him bullshitting.
Yeah.
So it's actor and director working together
in concert in a way that's like really satisfying too,
enhancing each other's work.
Yeah.
Rather than detract, I've ranted before about directors getting in the way of actors.
Yeah.
This is the opposite. This is what it looks like when
it's done well.
When a director supports their actor.
Right.
And actually, more than that, it's not simply about sitting there and observing it. It's about, like, what can I do cinematically to show the audience what Shatner is doing. Right. And he does it with this very
subtle,
very quick, subtle zoom in, zoom out. Like it's you blink and you'll miss it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's telling, it's like before he even reveals it to the crew, you know exactly
what Shatner's gonna do. Of course,
you know exactly what he's gonna do. The Star Bar.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. It's so interesting to me.
Complete with some sort of video game that looks like Snoopy battling the Red Baron,
but a hologram.
Right.
Which means
in hologram form. Yeah.
But in some ways, it's leaning into Star Trek's past. You have a Tribble there from the episode "The Trouble with Tribbles."
Mm-hmm.
But in other ways, I think this is each of these movies. When Star Trek: The Motion Picture came out, it was trying to emulate the success of Star Wars. Right? It was very clear.
Right.
It was trying to take something that worked in Star Wars and apply it to the Star Trek universe. And in the motion picture, they're doing it with scale and spectacle, which didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't match it. In Star Trek 2, it's dirty space, taking that element of Star Wars and running with it very successfully. And here, it's sort of like this movie's version of it is, let's have a weird alien parade in a bar.
Yeah, let's have a cantina.
Let's have a cantina.
Right.
Because it is so cantina.
It is.
And I would the holograms, I would argue, are Star Wars Holiday Special.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's this weird mix of Star Trek legacy.
Yeah, my biggest
and Star Wars pandering.
Yeah, looking back over my notes, my biggest complaint throughout it, I kept saying things like this is oddly comic. Like all the comedy they're going for is a little strange.
When I was young, this was the most confusing scene
really
I had ever encountered, and I break it down now as an adult, and I know exactly why, because you've got DeForest Kelley playing two different people,
right,
having a conversation with a character who speaks in broken English.
Yeah.
Of course I was confused. Of course I didn't know what was going on. Also,
do you think that character, by the way, because it seems like they were kind of going for a Yoda thing.
Yeah, in cadence,
pattern of speech,
but he looks like the Devil Man from the Cantina.
From the Cantina, exactly.
And with this, it's like you don't need any. You could just cut to the chase, right?
Right.
He's like, I need a ship. I have a ship. I need to take it to Genesis. I'm not taking you to Genesis. I'm gonna Vulcan death grip you.
It also kind of
that's it.
Right.
But the movie thinks you're gonna be interested in looking around the bar and all the funny aliens, and you're kind of not.
It also feels
Star
like
Wars 101.
It feels like they're trying to retrofit a Star Wars cantina scene in there, but it also feels like they're padding the movie a little bit, because you could have broken McCoy out of sickbay. As opposed to jail.
Oh, that's what I mean. There's sort of one outcome to this scene that you need to get.
Yeah, right.
Which is that he gets taken into custody, and there's a way of doing that which cuts to the chase much quicker,
right?
And isn't confusing and distracting in the way that this
right.
that this scene is. That said, one of my favorite DeForest Kelly moments as McCoy is when he attempts a Vulcan death grip.
It's really funny.
Just how much how hard he's trying to do it unsuccessfully. I mean, this is one of the best performances of one of the greatest characters, certainly in TV, but maybe even in film as well. After this, we get to something which I don't think you like as much as I do. I put here beautiful matte work on the snow cactuses. But I've
had a bit of
good.
I've had a bit of an evolution. But I
was willing to support you in saying that these are not good effects.
Yeah.
Because of previous conversations we've had where I feel like we're nostalgic for Matt in a way that is not objective about how ridiculous it looks.
On my first viewing, on my first rewatch, I kind of thought, I don't think they're doing the good work they think they're doing. And then when I rewatch it, I thought my thought I jotted down, I think I was a little too rough. Like, a lot of this looks good. Or interesting, at least. Like, it doesn't...
Yeah, it looks... It
doesn't look bad.
I'm a sucker for a matte painting.
Well, matte, yeah.
I think it looks beautiful, but I'm aware that might simply be shaped by my age, the kinds of movies I grew up with, and my attachment to them. So I am not unaware of the counter-argument of, saying... you shit on bad CGI all the time. It's just as artificial looking as this. Right. And it is, but I don't know. There's an artistry about it.
I have to admit that these give me the warm and fuzzies. We've talked about matte paintings before. And a matte painting just gives me the warm fuzzies. It just always does,
But there's a hand-drawn artistry about it that I don't think CGI has. But I mean, again, that's probably that is probably shaped more by my experiences as a film goer than what. Yeah,
because on the 1982 project, Matt would sit down, say for Wrath of Khan, and watch it with his kids, and sometimes they could just see an old Paramount logo and go, "Oh, gross." so a matte painting just might not do it for them,
And then we're pretty much into one of the best sequences in the whole franchise.
It's so fucking
Escape
good.
from Space Dock.
Escape from Space Dock is so good.
You could call this film Star Trek 3 Escape from Space Dock.
And I'd be happy. I'd be so happy.
This is where the movie peaks for me.
It's amazing.
I mean, so
on my first viewing, I remember watching it and writing down, this is so fucking good.
Well, it's like, it's kind of staged as a heist, right? Or like a prison breakout, which is great. So you have all that great genre stuff. There's just a great sense of fun and play here. The way Kirk comes in and he mocks Bones' affliction by giving him the Vulcan greeting and saying, "How many fingers am I holding up?" And then probably George Takei's one of two of his best moments in the series.
Mm-hmm.
And I might have a problem with it being martial arts if everything he did after it wasn't utterly cool.
Wasn't so great.
I mean, he
Don't call me tiny.
Don't call me tiny. And then just the elegance, the suaveness.
Yes, exactly.
Of the way he blows up that control desk.
James
again,
Bond ain't got nothing on him in that moment.
Nimoy's not cutting to something else. He's just taking this in. We don't need to see him blow up every single switch, but this is such a good moment.
Well, also the flair with which he's the jacket's kind of draped on his shoulders, if I recall.
Oh yeah.
When he walks out the door and says, "Don't call me tiny," it's all so good.
Yeah. And you've really got to get into that look because he doesn't change his clothes for 2 movies.
Right. Right.
And then, as if this wasn't all great enough, Space Howard Hunter as the captain of the Excelsior. Now this is 84. Audiences know him as Howard Hunter from Hill Street Blues.
Right.
And as far as I can tell, he's playing exactly the same character,
guy.
But he's now the Starfleet captain.
What is
And he also has Miguel Ferrer.
Miguel Ferrer, right?
Who's going to be the star
And
of
it's
the
James,
next generation.
James what? Seeking or
James B. Syking, yeah.
Syking, yeah.
Seeking, I'm not sure.
Did you notice,
you know-
by the way? Sorry to interrupt, but
No.
do you notice where John Larroquette is in this movie?
Oh, yes. He's the Klingon ambassador. No. Oh, no, he's the Klingon ambassador in the next movie.
He's
What was he in
Maltz.
this one? He's what?
Maltz.
What's a Maltz?
I don't know, but that's his character name, and I
Okay.
realized
in the bar.
I realized after watching it twice that I didn't spot John Larroquette.
But this is also interesting. Like, the movie's now given us 3 different kinds of Starfleet captain.
Yeah, right.
And a Starfleet admiral.
Mhm.
But we've got the kind of the by the book,
You've got
The
the
guys
by
in
the
charge
book
of the
guy,
Grissom.
but then you've got Hill Street.
pompous
Yeah, exactly.
technophobe. And then Kirk is the rogue maverick.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's like,
I-
what I love about the movie is you get a vision of all 3 men, and you know who you want to put your lot with. You know whose ship you'd rather be on.
yeah. And it's the one that's most like Ronald Reagan.
Shit.
Anyway. But also, like, George Takei has his, Sulu has his standout moment. And then they give
so
one
good.
to Uhura.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I don't know how to speak. I don't know how to speak from the perspective of a middle-aged African American woman, but
Right.
I do know, as if you needed to be told that. But
You don't say.
I do know that historically, African American women are tracking what Uhura does in Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
There's the famous story of her. Martin Luther King convincing her to sign on for the 3rd and final season of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
That's the story that Whoopi Goldberg tells
Yeah,
about
right.
being a kid going to a television saying there's a black woman on TV and she's not a maid.
Yeah.
I have got to think that this scene in which Uhura is matched up with a white college kid who seems
dumbass.
who acts like he knows everything
Yes.
despite her decades of experience and skill
Yes.
has got to speak to all middle-aged black women in America and how they are constantly
That's great.
overruled by these white
Simpletons.
middle-class morons.
Yeah.
I mean everything, and then she puts him in the closet and it's like, I think this has got to feel like a great moment. This is like a Mr. Tibbs moment. It's got for
Right.
for
I
like-
mean, every time
for like middle-aged black women
Yeah.
rather than young African American men, right?
every time I watch this movie and I see that scene, I always think, this is great.
And then she says this isn't reality, this is fantasy, which is hilarious.
Which is
a hilarious
yes.
line to say in the middle of a Star Trek film. But oh God, they're not even breaking out of space dock yet, and
We're just about there, but
yeah. But the crew going rogue for Kirk, Spock, and Bones.
yeah,
This is where this 15 years of the history of playing
of the
these
show
characters is
itself.
paying off.
Yeah.
Like, you need that. You need that history between them, and it explains everything.
Mm-hmm.
That is why they're doing this.
Because some of these people famously don't like each other in real life, and that never shows on screen.
I disagree.
Well, I should hedge that a little
I
bit.
disagree,
shouldn't I?
and there's a moment coming right up
You're
now.
right. Yeah.
The moment, and this is why it works so well, when William Shatner's Kirk is urging James Dew and Scotty to open the doors.
Yeah.
The doors, Mr. Scott, the doors. You can feel the hatred between them, but that's what makes that moment work.
Right.
They look at they're like this, they're like right next to each other, and Shatner is shouting in his face, "The doors, Mr. Scott, the doors!" And he goes, "I am working on it, Captain." Inches away from each other.
There's that moment, and I was remembering the moment later. I mean, we're not there yet, but when he they are able to get a couple of torpedoes out against Krug.
Yeah.
And then the shields won't come up. He's like, "Mr. Scott." He goes, "Well,
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting to take her into battle."
Yeah.
Yeah, horse's ass. I said I could
So-
get us here, but
And again, if you think of all that time we spent in space dock in the motion picture, we've completely inverted the slow
the form.
docking trope.
Yeah, exactly.
Because now we're leaving illegally and under attack.
Mm-hmm.
So the stakes could not be higher. And it's also time sensitive. They've got to get out before the doors. But like they've got to get out as the doors open.
And there's that great overhead shot from I almost said from Spock, from Leonard Nimoy.
Same thing. Yeah.
Where the doors open up and we're backing up out of it. And like, to me, I always get the sense of, how good George Takei's character is at his job in that moment.
Yeah.
It's not like you got a rear view mirror.
Yeah, it's a shame in the next two movies we undo that a little bit. But I mean, absolutely, it's just phenomenal. And then the punchline of it was they'd already sabotaged the Excelsior, so but Bones is there as our audience surrogate because he doesn't know.
Yeah,
but they've effectively they've sabotaged the new flagship of
the Federation. And
again, this is an anti-science film.
Yeah. But I love the sort of mischief within it because then Kirk kind of gives a wink and a smile to Bones, and then he goes, as fast as we can to Genesis planet, please. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's great. All right, why don't we take another break?
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
We're back once again, everyone. Tom and I are finishing up with Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Leonard Nimoy's first of two Star Trek motion picture movies. Not the motion picture.
Motion picture movies.
But motion picture movies.
I tried watching one of those non-motion picture movies. It wasn't great.
It was less than good.
It was lacking something.
I think movement.
Some kind of
emotion of some kind. So when last we left everyone, I think Grissom was going to blow up, right?
Yeah. This is a point at which I noticed.
Luckily, Savick and David are on planet Genesis at this point, looking for worms and Spock.
This felt like a little too much of a parallel with the last film. It's like didn't another ship blow up or at pretty much the same exact time? It'd be difficult to differentiate one from the other,
right?
I think. But I mean, this something that struck me, I think, at this point, is that this movie is a dark sequel to a dark sequel.
Yeah, right.
So everything gets progressively worse and bleaker for the characters. Mm-hmm. It's like downing the ante.
That's great.
So it's kind of. I think that mostly is a weakness. It's certainly where Nimoy drew the line at the end of this. It said we're not going to get any darker.
Yeah,
we're going to revert. We need to reverse the trend.
Well, I mean, not necessarily, because David still has to die.
Oh no, I mean at the end of the movie before he
Oh,
does
okay.
Voyage Home. Oh no, the dark shit's all got to happen.
I thought you meant specifically the blowing up of the Grissom.
No. And it's revealed that David has fucked up Genesis.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
It's a bit of a it contradicts the last film a little bit.
Sure.
But
this is also part of your anti-science.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
I was almost going to say rant, but that would be an unfair characterization, I think.
Not necessarily. Yeah. This idea, this idea that it was all a facade. It was never gonna. It's impossible. It was always a fail. It was always going to be a failure. I mean, they link it to Kobayashi Maru and Kirk, cheating like your dad did,
right?
Not believing in the no-win scenario.
But that's not the way a man of science thinks.
No.
That's the problem with it.
That is kind of the problem with it, yeah. So I'm not hugely convinced by that turn of events.
How do you fix that? I mean, is it like the Klingons do something that, or you know what? Maybe they had the answer all along, because they kind of talk about how just having Spock there is accelerating the demise of the planet.
Yeah.
But what if that was it?
Yeah, I know. That's really all you need.
It's really all you need.
We get some. We push back. We haven't really talked about what's going on the planet, which is Spock is growing up again.
Yes. When they open up,
he's having his own wonder years.
Yeah. When they open up his torpedo tube, he is not there. The worms are outside of it, and then somewhere fairly close by, they find baby Spock.
Baby Spock. And they're kind of doing an origin story for Spock within the frame of this storyline.
Right.
And we reach back into the mythology of the series to an episode called Amok Time, where this idea of Pon farr is explored.
Okay, yeah, right.
So that's what we're using to inform the storyline here. And it was meant to be part of the storyline for the next movie, because Saavik was supposed to have sex with him during his Pon farr, which is essentially when Vulcans are fertile, like they're in heat.
He was very young
Literally,
at that point, Tom. Kind of robbing the cradle, I say.
Maybe that's why they didn't go with it.
Yeah, I would say so.
Maybe it spoke to the ickier side of Star Wars. It's like maybe they were thinking, Star Wars has incest, we'll have pedophilia. How about
that? I think we'll cut short of that.
Although, like, knowing that and then seeing the scene where Saavik is helping him through his Pon farr, it's very clear that was what they want. That was where they were going with the story.
Yeah, right.
And the reactions between them. And there's more brinkmanship between Krug and Kirk.
Yeah.
And it's the bread and butter of the series, and it always works, but it's no Kirk and Khan.
It's no Kirk and Khan, but it can never raise to that level, but there's still a lot of good shit in there that I like. I like that Krug kind of susses out that, like, the Enterprise is probably more damaged than he's letting on, and he kind of takes a gamble and says, no, I'm not going to surrender. You surrender.
I do like how it's like for like again, because they're both rogue captains.
Yeah, right.
Kirk mentions that he's broken the peace treaty between the Federation and the Klingons, and
don't you tell me about breaking treaties.
And Kirk is now a rogue captain, so that's an interesting kind of wrinkle in there. I really like this. The killing one of the prisoners, I think, is a great device, because we have associations with each of these characters.
Right, exactly.
Like, any one of them dying
is bad for the audience.
is dramatically,
Yeah.
And
And I also like the way in which Christopher Lloyd's Krug's, I don't care which one.
Yeah.
So that, I like that anticipation and the guy, the Klingon kind of walking around them and of course, David sacrificing himself.
You love that.
He's a Kirk. you know I'm a sucker for a good sacrifice.
And yeah, I just think this must have been a huge surprise twist for the film.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow it's not the biggest swing even in this movie,
Right.
I would say.
Right.
But even though David has only been in one movie and as we've said before has had limited screen time, first of all, I think he's become an established character.
Yeah.
But it's his link to other legacy characters like Kirk and the development of their relationship that means it's such a huge event,
Right.
dramatically, because we know how Kirk is going to react to this.
Yeah.
And I think it's just beautifully played when Kirk learns that David's dead.
I was just going to ask you what you thought, and I think it's
stunning.
I think it's a really good moment.
They focus, and this is the same throughout the film. They focus on one action, one gesture
Mm-hmm.
that tells you everything you need to know. And here it's just he just
falls
off
down.
his chair. Yeah, and that's it. That's all you need. And I want to show that scene to people who
Say he's a bad actor.
who say that he's always over the top,
Yeah.
or he's always unrealistic, because clearly in the right directorial hands he really isn't. My only problem with David's death is, and I guess it's a problem you might have as well, is that he sort of turned bad in a way. Like before he died, we saw that he's a much more morally ambiguous character
Right.
after the revelation,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little bit of a cheat because it makes it easy for us to swallow his death.
Yeah. Well, but it
I
also.
kind of wish the movie hadn't played that card.
Do you think?
Both,
do you think
both
within
because
it?
of what we discussed, but also because of how it affects our reaction to his death.
Yeah.
I think it does feel like he's being punished for his mistakes, and I didn't really want that to be a part of it.
I don't know if I always go immediately there. It's more like a redemption.
But, yeah.
But you also wonder, is that the choice?
Yeah, I mean, he saves the others' lives. But,
Right. But is that the choice
know.
he would have made before he met his father? Or knew that Kirk was his father? Those are kind of interesting questions to be able to ask. So he's got an arc.
Yeah. I not at all. I mean, I like that it gives him a different dimension,
Mhm.
but again, when it's followed up with his death, I think it lets us off as an audience a little bit.
Yeah.
And then the movie pulls exactly the same trick with Kirk and Krug. Like, allowing it to be self-defense rather than Kirk taking revenge lets Kirk off the hook, I would say.
Yeah, but at the end of that fight, no, you're right. like he tried to,
But
he gave a valiant effort to trying to save his life, and Krug was still being an asshole. So,
Kirk's the one fighting dirty.
But even before that, I mean, like the big death of this entire movie is the death of the Enterprise.
The death of the Enterprise, Destruct Sequence 1, the most crackable code in cinema.
Ever.
1A.
0, 0, 0, 0.
Password. 1. Now, destroying the Enterprise is a huge swing, huge twist.
What I also like about it is we talked in the last movie about, Kirk being able to lower the shields on the other ship, and I like. I mean, they even have they have a line that references it, and it's appropriate for the moment because it says, "My God, what have I done, Bones?" He says, "You,"
quoting Dr. Robert Oppenheimer,
right? And he says, "You."
And of course, Genesis has already been called the
Doomsday
weapon,
right?
There's a nuclear
through line.
A nuclear weapons through line to this, which again doesn't catch science at its best.
No.
Which I think is the point.
But I like, that McCoy says you did what you had to do, what you always do. You give us a fighting chance to live, and just sort of.
It's the Kobayashi Maru in real life.
Yeah, right.
Which makes it the perfect. Well, it's not quite the end. It's a sort of perfect set piece for this film. Now there are many people who will say that blowing up the Enterprise is, a mistake that Star Trek can never come back from. Whereas I contend the mistake is not blowing up the Enterprise in this film, which I think is the right choice and a good one.
Yeah.
It is that they never stopped blowing up Enterprises after this.
Right.
They became addicted to it. And not just Enterprises, any ship that we have any attachment to is blown up in Star Trek from this point onwards.
That's amazing.
The Defiant, the Delta Flyer, they all get blown up multiple times. The Enterprise, I don't know how many more times the Enterprise gets blown up.
Yeah, it gets remade awful quick too for a a ship that was supposed to be put out to pasture.
Right.
By the end of 4, they're like, you know what? I know we said we were decommissioning, but we started making a new one while you guys were time traveling.
Right. That's exactly. How long were they away?
Yeah, exactly.
According to the film, seconds.
Yes.
So I think when people shit on this moment, they're thinking of what happened afterwards. In the moment,
Maybe.
It is absolutely.
It's so good.
It makes the movie. This and Escape from Space Dock are the highlights of the movie for me.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you.
I also like the scene that the scene more or less happens in real time as well. They put a clock on it. And it's over the clock, obviously, because it's a film, not real life. But it's not that much over.
But I also,
sort of buy it.
Going back to Christopher Lloyd, I love that he says, "I'll give you 2 minutes for you and your gallant crew."
Yeah.
There's some good dialogue that, and he's delivering it just right. And we talked about, his smart choices and kind of outsmarting Kirk in a moment, but then Kirk gets to roll, he gets to reverse that immediately. My note is Kirk has good ideas. He knows how, he's a survivor. He knows how to survive. And I love that.
I think
because his last line before they energize to the planet is, what's he say? "I'm looking forward to meeting you."
Yeah. The exploding Enterprise, I think it's the nail in the coffin of the motion picture, right? If you think about how much we fetishize the Enterprise, movie, to get to the end of the third movie and then actively destroy it, gleefully destroy it. And that's the film killing off its biggest legacy character,
right?
And not only that, they're going to do a whole movie without it, which I don't think anyone
ever
expected,
thought, right?
Even at this point. I'm speechless. I'm just looking at my notes. Throwing the Klingon. He gave his life to save us. Very New Testament. Kind of, and we're on the Genesis planet. Something I always felt, I always felt there was something janky about this part of the film, and now I realize that there's a potential plot hole in there. How are they going to get off the planet?
Well, that's the thing is
after they exploded the Enterprise. Like what was that? What
I always thought that in Kirk's head he was hoping to do what he did, which was find a communicator. That could only be his only plan. I mean, like, what else is there?
Right.
You're going to a planet that's blowing up.
Right. Unless you turn to Savick and say, so you have a ship, right?
Yeah, right. you
Nope.
took a shuttle down here, didn't you?
Exactly.
You didn't bother with teleportation, did you?
Like, I always felt there was a missing piece of the plan.
Yeah.
Somewhere. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is just this incredible foresight that we're used to
Mm-hmm.
from Kirk. It's typical Star Trek for talk of negotiations and then
Yeah.
you just have a fight.
Yeah.
And a bunch of coincidences mean that you have a fight. It's just that's how Star Trek rolls. We stand around talking about negotiations and treaties for a while, and then
we
Kirk has a
battle.
fight. Yeah, he really looks like a circus performer in that outfit, especially when he's flying through the air. Kirk,
Yes.
don't you think?
Oh, that yell is something.
Yeah, and then we talked about the self-defense out. He never becomes the avenging angel, and then it's kind of interesting when he gets on the bird of prey. And the Klingon, kind of very honorably says,
Yes.
"I do not deserve to live," and he says, "Fine, I'll kill you later."
I also have a
And
question. Is that guy still on board the ship when they go back in time?
That would be the best post-credit.
That would be so good.
like the
He's just drowning in the ocean.
like the guy in the taxi in Airplane.
Yeah.
So he's just sat in the bird of prey going, "I'll give him 10 more minutes, but that's it."
How great would it be if he popped up out of the ocean in 4?
Well, absolutely. I'm surprised he didn't turn up in Picard season 2. They left him in the 80s.
I'm not there yet.
You never need to be.
I know you keep saying that.
It's New Trek is misguided at best. It's just and then he walks that back and he says, I lied. I'm not gonna kill you. And it's just, and again, it's like, let's pick one or the other. It's like, what? I think they're being unnecessarily. I don't know. They're sort of trying to have their cake and eat it with Kirk.
You think so? I mean, I don't take the "I'll kill you later" comment very seriously. Kirk's a lot of things, and he's a rule breaker, but I don't think of him.
His son just died, and he's in revenge mode, and I don't know if they see a future movie coming like Star Trek 6 where they will deal with this more fully,
Mm-hmm.
but they do seem to be offsetting it at this moment.
Yeah, that's true. But he also knows that that this isn't the Klingon that killed his son. I always had the sense that Kirk has a little more honor than that. Which is kind of the relationship that they're setting up in 6 with Chang. These two old warriors.
But the way the conversation goes down.
No, yeah, I get what you're saying.
He's the lying Earth colonist.
Yeah.
And this Klingon guy is the honorable one in the situation.
So here's my biggest thing for this movie, because we talked in the last movie that when Genesis blows up and Khan is dead, that's not the end of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing happens here. When planet Genesis blows up and Krug is thrown into lava, the movie's not over. But in Star Trek II, we have this very compelling scene of Spock saving the Enterprise and then talking to his friend before he dies. In this movie, we've got about 10 minutes of putting hands on foreheads. So
I don't know.
Maybe that's less compelling.
Well, he does it as a montage.
No,
He
you're right.
Doesn't waste time.
He's not
on
wasting a a lot of time on it, but
it's a pretty. I mean, it's the whole point of the movie.
It is.
as well.
It is. I can't
We've
deny
got
that. And what I will admit to is that from the moment you actually see Leonard Nimoy, and he actually comes down the steps, he and it is so compelling then I don't give a shit anymore. But
It's like it's a sports-like reveal.
yeah, right.
It's like he's a boxer going into the ring. I don't. Well, I have a problem with the fact that apparently Vulcan is just Asia. So when we get to Vulcan, there's just an Asian guy with a long mustache in traditional Southeast Asian
Garb
dress with a gong.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no, the Vulcans.
That is not Vulcan.
The Vulcans and the Chinese are two different things.
Right.
We get celebrity guest Vulcan Judith Anderson.
Right.
From Rebecca and Laura
Mm-hmm.
and other films that
Yes.
are girls' names. And yeah, we're right back in that Vulcan mysticism that the Admiral was sniffing at.
Yeah.
And again, this is this attempt to rewrite the going back to Amok time and that essential contradiction
Sure.
that they're a mystical people who've kind of and this is like, in order to bring Spock back to life, they have to return to their primitive origins to do
Yeah.
it. There's a great line from Bones in here where
There is.
they ask if is there any who's gonna give
Who's doing
Spock
this?
his
Or
marbles back. He's like, a hell of a time to ask.
Right.
And then the reveal of Spock, which is Nimoy's masterstroke, because we've spent the film either hearing Spock's voice
Right.
or half seeing
Yeah.
his face.
We feel like
this
he's
gives
been
us-
in the whole movie, and he doesn't arrive until there's 2 or 3 minutes left.
Yeah. And then, you have Spock either trying to remember who his crew are, or footage of Leonard Nimoy playing an improvisational game as a director. One of the two. And then, this is the Reaganite part of the movie, right? The needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many.
Yes.
Which, if you depoliticize it, you could just see as a purely an impasse, where we're
And just an
flipping the
inverse, right?
catchphrase.
They're just
Like we did with they're
Of
they're
course.
here, they're back, we're back in Poltergeist. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. But in 1984,
you read a bit more into it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And just, everything else in
The
the movie
needs of the one outweigh
is a
the needs
pro-faith-
of the many.
pro-faith, anti-science agenda. It all seems to fit. So, and I guess the fact that it's not really supporting my case that I quite like the sequence.
Right,
by
right.
saying that we were ending with reciting dialogue from the last movie again.
Yeah, right.
So we've kind of gone nowhere. But it has a moment I absolutely love, and there's another one of these in Star Trek at the end of Star Trek 4 as well. Essentially, it's cast photo time, right?
Yeah, right,
Except,
right,
except we're
right,
doing
right.
it on screen.
Yeah. And we're going
And we
one
get
by
the-
one.
We get the signature eyebrow raise,
Mm-hmm.
and you watch them, and I guess they're both Leonard Nimoy directed movies, so he deserves the credit. But it looks like a genuinely warm moment, not just between the characters, but the actors as
Yeah.
well. So he's really good at filming those. It looks kind of like offhand, almost looks like they don't know they're on screen,
Right, right.
like it's just a rap party or something. And it ends with "and the adventure continues." Once again, the
Yes.
fallacy of the accidental trilogy. You don't end a movie with "and the adventure continues" and then claim you
And then we
accidentally
made a
3-film
trilogy.
serial.
That's amazing. I like this movie.
I do too. Yeah.
This movie isn't as appreciated as much as it should be.
No, not at all. And I think even down to really small things like when they do the ritual at the end, they do a kind of low-key montage.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like a movie that's got a very strong grip on its use of time.
Yeah. Well, except for
Like,
the bar scene.
not- Yes, true. And I was going to say not to the extent of the next movie,
Right.
where that improves again.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think of how much storytelling they've done relatively efficiently,
Yeah.
full of dramatic interest.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. It doesn't it you know. But now I'm thinking of the whales, and maybe that's not necessary.
Right.
We do take a lot of time with those whales, so maybe there's always a fly in the ointment. But on the whole, I think it makes good use of its time.
Put this
on
whale
screen.
in my ointment.
But it doesn't, it just doesn't kind of blow you away with original storytelling,
Right.
in the same way that the others, most of the other Star Trek movies do.
Do you have anything left, and if not, a credit check?
Definitely a credit check. There's a dolly grip on this film called Tom Sawyer, and I like to think this anticipates the time travel in the next
That's
film.
amazing.
There's also an episode of Next Generation called Time's Arrow where they go back in time and meet Mark Twain.
Oh,
So-
I don't think I've seen that one.
I'd rush to it quicker than Picard Season 2, but not as quickly as, say, Something You Want to Watch Now. Alien language created by. There's someone whose job it is to solely write
Wow.
alien languages.
And then explain to Shatner how to do it.
Right. There's a credit for Chief Engineer, which means that rank exists both in world
And yeah.
and in the and off screen, which I think is great. 3 Johnny Mercer songs
Really?
in this film, and I'm wondering, did they get a package deal by getting rights to 3 by the same guy? That's all I've had, really.
All right.
Yeah, the prosthetic designs. This is not funny, but I'll say it anyway. The prosthetic designs are done by the Berman studio, Rick Berman, who will do all the prosthetic designs for Star Trek going forward into the
Oh, okay.
the rest of the movies, TV series.
That's interesting.
So,
You're right. It's not
I
funny,
think-
but interesting.
I think this is. Is this the first time we've needed prosthetics
Mm,
in the series? Like in a creature design sense, I know we've had to do wounds and
Right.
things before. But
yeah, maybe.
could be.
All right. Well, we want to know what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Are you a fan of Star Trek 3? Where does it lie for you within the sequels? Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here. I'm from the How Dare You Awards. When you hear us next, we're going back in time. We're going to talk about Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Until then, say goodbye, Tom.
Up your shaft.
That's good stuff.